You guys have asked for this so much and it's finally time. We are starting our modern day story analysis. It's going to be a series of videos dealing with all the events that involve the new present day storyline that have been told through the Animus Hub and Assassin's Creed Shadows, a story that starts as a clean slate for all kinds of fans and that involves some compelling lore elements, some philosophy arguments, not a lot of gameplay, but surely a lot to discuss overall that I can't wait to delve into, so let's not wait any longer and let's dive into the first episode of our modern day story analysis. Modern day. The blessing and the curse of Assassin's Creed. Well, 3 years ago, it was announced that within the then announced Assassin's Creed Infinity platform, the modern day would have been redesigned, a story of its own, less invasive or completely not invasive as for what concerned the historical story and especially asynchronous compared to the various releases, meaning that it would have been a story that would have had a flow of its own that isn't spelled out by the main releases of the franchise, and finally, after a few months, we are indeed seeing that coming to fruition. Oh, and they did say gameplay within the modern day story would have come with time, and that too is true, with little to no gameplay at the start of the modern day story, and finally some sparks of gameplay being made available very recently. Thus, with this new series of videos, we're going to try and analyze and explore this whole new modern day narrative and its underlying story. A story set in the future, a story about technology, about free will versus control, about memories and perspectives, a story of conspiracy, and possibly a dystopian story too. And we're going to do that chronologically as much as possible, so not in the order that the modern day elements are discovered as you play, but in what we believe to be the actual chronological order of the events so that we can have a better understanding of what is actually happening in this new present day setting. Thus, very roughly, we're going to go through the first two sets of modern day files that can be found in the Animus Hub, which lay the backstory before we actually start playing. Then we'll have a look at how our main character in the modern day, that is, us the players, enters the fray, accessing the new Animus Ego, and then the Animus Hub, their first steps in the Animus guided by a mysterious construct towards a very peculiar path, and finally, for the first set of analysis, we are going to get to the ending of the modern day story in Shadows, but of course, after this, because the modern day story has a continuous flow of its own, you can also expect more analysis about the new modern day content drops as they get released, so really, it's a matter of catching up now. One more thing, you might have seen it already and you'll see it again, these analysis videos are going to feature a lot of stock footage because, well, there hasn't been much gameplay up until now, save from the latest Animus Rift, and Ubisoft instead decided to rely its initial modern day content drop on text files and a few cutscenes, making it so that what I believe to be an actually compelling story became underappreciated by most or even missed out on completely. So with this new series of videos, we are going to also try and highlight all the interesting elements of the modern day story in order to get you up to speed for the upcoming story drops. And we start, like I said, with the content of the modern day files coming from the projects/battle passes within the Animus. So, like I said, these files are found within the Animus Hub and more specifically in the Vault section, and it's interesting to wonder why in lore these files are actually made available to our main character in the modern day, but before that, it's interesting to wonder how the files came to be and why they are in Abstergo's databases. Some of them are Abstergo operatives' reports, some of them are actual communications between Abstergo directors, some are online chats between Abstergo employees, and those are quite easy to understand as part of the internal screening you'd expect from Abstergo. But these files also comprise of personal diaries, end-to-end encrypted chats, even scripts of secret meetings of various assassins, which very much provides a perspective on how permeating Abstergo's control is in this dystopian near future. Still, our modern day protagonist, that is, us, is given access to these files thanks to some motivation explanations that we'll get into in our future videos, but strictly following the game's narrative, it is the guide character that is telling our modern day main character to pursue what he calls the anomalies in the Animus, which only in concept are similar to the ones from Valhalla, but in reality are just weekly or bi-weekly missions. So really, it is through the guide and through our own effort that we're able to gain access to the data fragments that allow us to obtain the files that are actually predating our experience, as we'll see. So after all of this introduction, we are going to have a look at the first two set of files, as pretty much all of their events seem to take place before the modern day events of the game, and more specifically, in this video, we are going to focus on the first of them. The first set of files is called Legacy, and it's both about the legacy left by a dead father and assassin to an unknowing son, but also supposedly about the legacy, or really about what's left of the assassins in our new modern day setting and how they are faring. As we'll see, the story will be told from different perspectives and with different methods, which matches really well with the concept of history and memories being the sum of different perspectives that is going to be discussed towards the end of this set of files. The first file is called Diary of Joel Eastman 1 and is one of the files that we had already partially analyzed a few months ago in our previous foreshadows when it appeared in the Animus Hub trailer, and in our analysis we did mention that this was the first part of a personal journal by one Joel Eastman, a British man from Gloucester, the son of a dead father who, unbeknownst to him, was part of the Assassin's Brotherhood. More specifically, at the start of these files we find him in Marrakech, Morocco. He starts his journal by saying that it's WBT, that is the wet bulb temperature, over 32 degrees, which, as we explained already, means that 32 degrees is the lowest temperature that air can reach when cooled by the evaporation of water into it, meaning that climate change has hit the world harder and harder, so much so that heat is now at a basically unbearable level. Hence why Joel says that there's a heat curfew in place, that people can barely survive with air conditioning, otherwise they end up dead. Hence why the people who could afford it have already left Marrakech, which is also generating, according to Joel, the conditions for some quote-unquote warlords to settle in. Joel is in Marrakech because of a mission that, as we'll see, was given to him by his father with his dying words, so he decided to complete it, but without knowing much about it. And yet, as soon as he got to Marrakech at a station, he noticed a man was following him. Still, he tried to carry out his missions, which was to get to a stall in a souk right off the Jema el-Fna square in the Medina district of the city, reach the stall keeper and give him an owl of sorts. But because Joel doesn't know much about the mission, he doesn't know what kind of owl to bring to the stall keeper. Eventually, he brings a drawing, and it's interesting to see that amidst all things, Joel's dad had agreed upon the owl being the symbol of this interaction. I suppose the closest reference I can think of is one to the Greek goddess Athena and to the city of Athens during the Peloponnesian War, which were both portrayed or symbolized by the owl, so I guess this could be an indirect reference to Assassin's Creed Odyssey and a self-reference to Ubisoft Quebec, who had developed it. So he drops the owl, and he was supposed to receive instructions by the stallkeeper, but within the diary he doesn't mention whether he was able to complete his mission or received any instructions. What we do know is that he then left the stall and tried to get rid of the man that was following him by losing him in the alleys, which I guess shows he already has the skills for this kind of situation. At some point, he also stops to consider how different conditions are in here, how unjust they are to kids and families, how things are not right in the world in this new modern day setting, which leads him to think about an argument he had with his dad many years prior, where his father desperately asked him to join him so that they could change the world together, but Joel answered negatively, that it was too late to mend the world, that the so-called Great Machine was was too strong to counter, and this was a huge disappointment to Joel's dad. It's probably what kept them apart for years, but what Joel didn't know is that his father was tied to the assassins or was an assassin himself. This was likely an indirect question to join them, to join the assassins, and Joel's cowardice was a huge disappointment to his father. If only, says Joel, after his father died, he did go on to do something, to perform the mission that he gave him, whatever it was, hoping to make him proud even if it was too late. The second file we get to see is an operations report by an Abstergo operative, even though the Abstergo name is never mentioned in the file. It's a report of an operation taking place in Marrakech, and by reading through it, it's quite clear that this is about the men that were tailing Joel Eastman in Marrakech. More specifically, if we look at it, the report is presented as a codified internal document, which actually helps us glean more information, but the way it's actually presented, like many other files in here, looks coldly archived, almost machine-like. It says that the report was submitted by Hamza Belkacem, who is the author of the report too, and is identified as EMP number 11/422, with EMP likely to stand for employee, and we also see that the report was submitted in Arabic and was then translated. The object of the report is what is defined as surveillance on suspected contact location and is codified with an operation code, opcode RZ/MK3443, which are codes I can't fully identify, if not maybe for the MK indicating Marrakech, meaning Abstergo at this point already had more than 3,000 operations in Marrakech. And could RZ be restricted zone? I don't know, and it really looks like a formal report were it not for its intentional lack of a date for the event. Operative Belkacem mentions that he was conducting a stakeout on a location as ordered, with the location evidently being the stall that Joel Eastman was about to visit. This means that Abstergo already knew something was going on with that stall. Belkacem wasn't alone, he was with another operative called Idrissi, and they both noticed that at 10 PM a Caucasian male approached the stall and started speaking with the stall keeper, which we'd find out is called Shafiq El-Harar, and his profile is codified as PE/MK120. I'd imagine PE stands for something along the lines of person of interest or external person, so separate that from Abstergo employees, and again in this case we can see the MK acronym meaning Marrakech. Of course, the Caucasian male is Joel Eastman, and thus we find out that he went to the souk at night at approximately 10 PM, and then the Abstergo operatives took an interest in him at that point. Anyway, Belkacem and Idrissi do see Joel pass over a piece of paper to El-Harar. This is the drawing of the owl that he mentioned in his diary, but the storekeeper apparently tried to refuse, and according to Belkacem, that's because he suspected he was being surveilled, and he was right apparently, because the two operatives did try to get Joel, but he saw them, and as we know, he dashed through the alleys to not get caught. But again, Belkacem feels like Joel was tipped off by El-Harar, who might have seen the two operatives in advance, and we can imagine some assassin instinct going on right there. El-Harar, one way or another, must have been in contact with the assassins to be able to notice the Abstergo operatives, even though, even through this file, we don't get to know if he provided Joel with the instruction that his father's missions seem to dictate. Through the report, we see that Belkacem was a superior to Operative Idrissi, but even if he gave the order to apprehend the stallkeeper once Joel had dashed, Idrissi chose to chase the Englishman anyway. Thus, they split up to try to catch Joel, but as we know, they weren't able to find him for a time, because what we didn't know, what Joel didn't add to his diary, is that Idrissi found Joel again, and a fight of sorts ensued, with one gunshot being fired, supposedly by Joel, and Idrissi falling to the ground. While Belkacem got there, he pointed his own gun at Joel, but he was dashing away in the souk and it was too dangerous to shoot. So Belkacem tried to chase recognize Joel again, but to no avail, so he got back to Idrissi until the paramedics arrived, and then finally went to the stall to apprehend El Harar, but he had also dashed not just from the stall but also from his house, another hint at El Harar possibly being an assassin or assassin contact constantly on the move. The third file is the transcript of a wiretap. We can even see the number written in there, which is located in Morocco because of the +212 prefix, and this is the number of room 21 of the hotel where Joel Eastman is staying, which means that after the commotion at the souk, he got back to his hotel. The phone call, which as we'll see is hinted to be scanned by AI, lasts for almost 2 minutes and starts at 21:13 or 9:13 p.m, which is an inconsistency as the operations report mentioned that Joel was at the souk at 10 p.m, and this call is supposed to happen almost right after that. While it's scanned by AI, the call has some human notes on it by someone at Abstergo, who states that the two people talking are Joel Eastman, who is now identified by Abstergo as PE/MK545, again PE for like a person of interest or external person, and MK for Marrakech, supposedly where he was identified by Abstergo for the first time, and Tatiana Dane, considered by Abstergo as a high priority target and is registered as PE/TO3441, so another profile registered by Abstergo, but in a different city that I guess starts with T and has an O in it, like Toronto I guess. Let me know which city you think she might be from. And still, it's an interesting call that Dane is making from a phone booth several streets away from Joel's hotel. She is criticizing how definitely not inconspicuous Joel has been going around Marrakech, asking for quote-unquote the owl, which is now behind inverted commas and with capital letters. Now it gets a little bit clearer. The owl is likely a nickname for Tatiana or the group that she's been part of, and Joel's mission was not even to talk to the stallkeeper, he just had to present a visual representation of an owl to mean that he wanted to be contacted by them. Joel presents himself to Tatiana as Jeff Eastman's son and finally mentions what his actual mission was, that is finding the owl and then passing on some important information as part of his father Jeff's final wish. Tatiana definitely recognizes Jeff's name as if they had partnered in the past, a clear hint at both of them being part of the assassins. She says she's sorry and then asks about the information, but Joel says that Jeff was quite specific about delivering the information only in person, of course worrying about any potential spying by externals and especially Abstergo, as we'll see. Tatiana finally accepts to meet Joel at her own conditions, which involve meeting immediately, hence why I think this call should be happening right after the commotion at the souk, and she says that she doesn't think that that area of the city has AI scanning the wiretaps, but evidently she is mistaken. The fourth file of the legacy group is called E2EE Chat, Dane and Other, where E2EE Chat means end-to-end encrypted chat, well, clearly not so encrypted, and like the title says, it's a chat between Dane and Other, where Dane is Tatiana Dane, the lady that just had a chat with Joel Eastman, here also called Yana and indicated in the chat as TD, while the other person is indicated as PA, and from subsequent files we know his name is actually Paul Agar. It's a chat where Tatiana tells Paul, another member of her cell of assassins, that she is getting back to their hideout after collecting Jeff Eastman's son, confirming that Joel made it in time to their meetup, and here Paul confirms that Jeff was quote-unquote one of us, meaning that Joel's father was indeed an assassin and was likely trying to get his son to join them, but without success, and it's indeed this, the fact that Joel isn't cleared, so to speak, that worries Tatiana, who asks Paul to get Baba to run a check on him, with Baba Mbuyi being another member of Tatiana's cell, and through this conversation we actually get to know what happened to Joel's father. Apparently, Jeff Eastman was with the cell of another assassin called Abe White, and they went for an infiltration at an Abstergo compound, but they were found out. White got killed, and Jeff Eastman was wounded but survived long enough to pass on the information he had found to Joel, and told him how to contact Tatiana's assassin cell through the Owl exchange in order to pass on that information that was so critical to the assassins. After this, Tatiana says that she's still keeping Joel with her because he could indeed become part of the assassins, as not so many of them are left in this new modern day setting. She also believes Joel has proven to be viable for the cause through his exploits in Marrakech, which also included sweet talking and bribing a guard at a checkpoint while they were getting out of the city. Eventually, they both agree to test him if Baba's background check doesn't turn up anything suspicious. The next file in the Legacy set is the transcript of the audio of a meeting of Tatiana's assassin cell along with Joel Eastman, and the discussion starts in the middle of things, with the cell already planning their next mission, leaving a lot unsaid. So let's go through that first. Because the group is gathered all together and they are planning their next move, it means that Tatiana and Joel were able to reach the rest of the cell. We don't know how much it took them to get there or even where the meeting point is, and then Joel presented himself to them and they to him, with the cell comprising of the following 5 people. Tatiana, Dane, and Paul Agar. They seem to be the 2 people leading the cell. It's not clear if one of them is actually the leader. Bas the Young, he seems to be like a supporting operator from a distance. He seemingly has a van of his own, and even for this meeting he is not in the room with the others. Elu Ahoka, she seems to be the explosives expert, and Baba Mbui, he should be the tech expert. In the previous file he was mentioned to be the person who was going to perform the background check on Joel, and in the mission he is going to control car locks and engines from a distance. Also, after presenting himself and before the transcript at our disposal, Joel eventually told them in person all the information that his father died in order for him to relate to them. And this information was indeed so important that it got them to plan a new mission for the entire cell, which involves apprehending a high-value target and secure them. The actual transcript starts indeed in the middle of things as they're going through the plan. The cell is going to track a convoy of cars going down a mountain early in the morning, with their target being placed in the second car of the convoy. They are going to blow up a bridge after the second car has gone through it, and then the first car through a mine they are going to lay in the road, and finally play with the locks and the engine of the second car so that they can take out the guards and apprehend the target that Jeff Eastman told them about. All of this is going to happen thanks to Jeff Eastman and to the details that he got from Abstergo's databases, and that's why Joel wants to be part of this, even if we don't know if he has been told about the Assassins or Templars. He wants to be part of this because he owes it to his father, and that's why the team allows him to join them in the mission. The next file is a second extract from the diary of Joel Eastman, which takes place as he and the assassins are traveling towards the mission location and have been doing that for 2 days, so he must have been quite far from their gathering location. It's a beautiful document where Joel is thinking back to his time with his dad, the several journeys they had together, sometimes for months, at some remote dig sites, which hints at Jeff Eastman potentially being an archaeologist of sorts, of course conducting some other type of research for the assassins as well. Joel says that despite what most believe, there is a whole lot to explore in the world yet. That's what his dad taught him. He taught him to move between the lines, which is very assassiny if you ask me. He mentions traveling to Greece and Afghanistan with his dad, seeing the person that he was, a giant in his eyes, and now Joel says he's met his people, meaning he very likely knows that they are assassins by now. He very likely knows their purpose and what they do, and he's not surprised at all that his father fell in with them, because he always hated what Abstergo did to history, because quote-unquote they made it too easy. Jumping in the memory of somebody to directly see history instead of reading books and documents and sources, instead of excavating old ruins, digging through clay with one's bare hands, and the reason why Jeff Eastman thought consuming history through the Animus is too easy is that memory is unreliable, especially if it's someone else's memory controlled by Abstergo, and more importantly, that history is made out of several points of views, that one single point of view isn't enough to tell a whole story, to describe and especially discuss how things really happened. This document right here is super interesting because through this story the devs are trying to convey a message about the nature of memory and the nature of history, which are both a matter of perspectives, of different points of view, which should be all analyzed to get a better comprehension of what happened, and conversely, the focusing and crystallizing on a single point of view doesn't allow to learn anything. It very much leads into bias, into radicalization, and eventually also into blind belief, which allows people to be easily swayed by Abstergo in the game. But is this message really about Abstergo? I also think that this discussion on single memories and perspectives being unreliable and insufficient to learn is really beautifully connected to the early phases of Shadows, where the guide says that memories come to us in fragments, that memories are fractured, that memories can be tampered with because of external factors or intentionally doctored, or that interacting with some of them can make one feel tranquil and complacent. This all goes in the direction of saying that one perspective, especially fractured and biased, isn't enough to get the whole picture in this game as much as in life. It's very much what the guide is trying to show us throughout the game, as we'll see. Back to Joel's diary, he says that as a boy he followed his father everywhere, up until a point where he felt that Jeff himself was getting too radicalized, while Joel also wanted to build an identity of his own, and that's where he refused to join him. But now he regrets that, looking at what he's doing right now, being on his way to kidnap a scientist, which is new at this point. The target of the assassins is a scientist. Joel realizes that he really is doing what his father would have wanted in the first place, and for the assassin cause that is the one that Jeff believed in anyways, and thus if he ended up here anyway, he regrets not joining his father in the first place, as that could have saved his father's life or at least grant them more years together. The seventh and final file of the Legacy set is yet again from another perspective. See, the shifting of perspectives is even in the narrative structure of this story, and this time it's a letter or email from an Abstergo higher-up called Director Ospanov to a security chief called Klein, and it's not the most pleasant of communications. In the letter, Ospanov orders Klein to resign and submit themselves to internal investigations in light of the recent outrage committed against our operatives. More specifically, he says that he and his team failed at protecting quote-unquote Dr. Muller, who was an integral part of Project Mnemosyne, and also failed to implement kill protocols to ensure that his knowledge did not end up in enemy hands. So basically, through this part of the letter, we get to know that the mission that the assassins were planning was carried out successfully, and now we found out that their scientist target was called Dr. Muller, and that he was an integral part of a new and critically important project for Abstergo called Project Mnemosyne, for which we don't know much about in this file, but we do know that Mnemosyne in the Greek mythology was the goddess of memory, who in some cases, in some rituals, was described to have the power to allow people to remember what they had seen, so indirectly the power and control over what people people could remember and see, so we can have already a vague idea of what the Templars were or are trying to do with this project. And Project Nemesis is really an important and critical element to Abstergo's new plans in this new modern day set in the future. According to Ospanov, allowing Dr. Muller to be absconded and not killing him to avoid his knowledge ending up in the assassin's hands has jeopardized the Templars' interests and plans on a global scale, and even slowed down the project itself. To make things worse, it looks like Klein, as a security chief, on several occasions stated that the assassins in this near future setting were no longer a threat, no longer able to organize and strike back, but Ospanov already got intel that this kidnapping action by the assassins was linked to the recent infiltration at Abstergo's Halland's Bluff facility, which is definitely the facility that Jeff Eastman and Abe Whitesell infiltrated and where they got the information about Project Nemesis and Dr. Muller's transportation. So pretty much two huge blunders under Klein's watch that not only proved his claims about the assassins wrong, but also put Project Nemesis on the back foot. And in Ospanov's words, this is the worst time it could happen because the Templars, at the time of Ospanov's writing, are on the verge of taking a revolutionary step forward unprecedented in their history. And at this point, according to Ospanov, the project is too far along to be stopped or for its course to be changed, and thus Abstergo is now on the back foot as well, having to keep on going with the project, not having their main scientists to follow it, and not knowing what the assassins are going to do, where their attack is going to come from, and how they're going to try and sabotage it all. Thus, the uncomfortable task of supervising Abstergo's security, as the Templars are going to try and fulfill this project, will rest on somebody else's shoulders, and I'm pretty sure that Klein won't be there to see it. So that's the ending of the legacy set of modern day files, where we got an idea of where the assassins are standing now, or at least one of their cells, while in this new modern day setting set in the future, Abstergo are even more in control than they were in our time, so much so that they can wiretap calls, they have AI scanning live conversations, they have profiles on everybody, but most importantly, as Joel says, they control all the memories, and if history is now consumed by using the Animus and reliving genetic memories, it means that somehow Abstergo has control over the narration on history. But how does he have control over the memories, and are there plans stopping there? What is this Project Nemesis about? That's what we're going to discuss in the next video of this series, where we are going to analyze the second set of modern day files called Awakening. But if you can't wait for that and you just want to be catapulted in the most recent events of the modern day story, you can just check out our recent video where we are showing the full version of the recently released Animus Rift mission, and you can bet one day we will analyze that as well. Thank you for watching. A huge thanks to all of our ATA insiders and initiates for their amazing support, and I'll see you all in our next video.